Hi friends, welcome back. I'm Elaine and I'm living with autoimmune disease. There are not many times in life that you can recall the exact place you were at an exact moment in time. However, October 17th at 5:04 p.m., I can tell you exactly where I was and what I was doing. Today I'm wearing an Oakland Athletics shirt. I'm sad they're not in Oakland anymore, but this is the team that I root for Major League Baseball. And the reason I root for the A's is because I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. More specifically, I grew up in the East Bay part of the Bay Area. For those that do not know what October 17th is, it is the anniversary of the 1989 earthquake in San Francisco. Actually, it was epicentered near Santa Cruz, but I think most people recall it for being San Francisco area because there was a big baseball game during that earthquake. Yes, the San Francisco Giants were playing the Oakland Athletics in the World Series, something we called Battle of the Bay. I was in my childhood home in front of the television, sitting on the floor, doing my homework, and I was 12 years old. My dad and brother were actually away in San Francisco on a fishing trip and were due home in the next hour or so. My mom was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Pretty often what she did around 5 p.m. probably was gonna feed me and then waiting for my brother and dad to come home. All of a sudden, the floor started to move. And I was sitting on the floor and I heard the announcers on the baseball game start to say, "It's an earthquake." At the same time, my mom came from the kitchen, which wasn't very far from the area that I was sitting in, and told me, hurry, we need to get to safety. Everything I had ever learned in school was to get under a table. They teach us in school to get under a desk if there's an earthquake and cover our neck. We grew up having earthquake drills. And so I needed to get under my desk if there was a big earthquake. And this was a big earthquake. So the floor started to move. My mom grabbed me, but I headed under the dining room table while she was heading for a door frame. The reason why getting under the dining room table was not ideal in my home is because our dining room is surrounded by windows. As a child, you don't think about things like that, but my mom did in that split instant and knew that that was not a safe place for us to be, especially if the windows broke out, which could very well happen in an earthquake of this magnitude. Mom grabbed me, held me in a door frame in front of her. And there's something as a child when you know that something's bad because your parent is upset or your parent is frightened. I think as a child, we often look to our parents for reassurance, but sometimes our parents aren't able to give that reassurance because they're scared themselves. I stood in the door frame, my mom holding on to me. Now my mom is little, she's only about 5'1", and I had already kind of gotten to be her height at that point. So she just held on to me like any mom would do. The floor rolled, we could see the floor rolling, and then it was over. And it was just the two of us and everything was silent. The TV had gone blank because all the signals were lost. I remember my mom going and checking the water to make sure we still had water. We knew we had electricity. And then came the adult part of learning what an earthquake was. And we went outside to check the gas lines. So my mom took me outside because she wasn't going to leave me inside by myself. Because there's a great probability, and almost always, of aftershocks. And the aftershock could be even as worse as what the earthquake was you just lived through. So she didn't want to leave me in the house. So we went outside, checked the gas lines, got the flashlight, made sure everything was okay. We saw cracks in the sidewalk, cracks in the street. Now, I grew up in a suburb of San Francisco in the East Bay, so we weren't directly impacted as bad as some of the other areas. Our neighbors were all outside trying to rationalize what had just happened, what we had all just lived through. When an earthquake hits, it's that first part of the jolt that you don't know how strong something is going to be until it's with you or over. That earthquake was a 6.9 on the Richter scale. Cypress structure collapsed. After marrying David, I realized that maybe some people didn't understand that the Cypress structure was not the Bay Bridge. The Cypress structure was a portion of freeway that sort of pancaked on each other. And the people commuting home when the earthquake hit, the upper portion of the Cypress structure collapsed onto the lower portion, and the lower portion collapsed. So everything was just a pancake. 5:04 p.m. in the Bay Area is one of the busiest times to be on the road because everybody is commuting home at that time, which is why the Cypress structure was so devastating and why so many lives were lost that day, because people were just trying to get home from work, trying to get home to watch the baseball game. You may all recall that the Bay Bridge did lose a span, and a portion of the Bay Bridge collapsed into itself. The bridge is built in spans, and so it was a portion that just fell. But a majority of the life was lost in the Cypress structure. And the apartment homes that collapsed in San Francisco and the fires that broke out. How this directly impacted me was my dad and brother were in San Francisco. And the only way to get home quickly from San Francisco to the East Bay is the Bay Bridge. With the Bay Bridge being taken out, you had everybody from the World Series game trying to get back to the East Bay. And now there's no way to get home quickly because everybody's trying to get out of the city, San Francisco, and the Bay Bridge is now impacted by the earthquake and damaged. The Cypress structure has collapsed. The freeway system was a mess. Everybody had to figure out how to get back home that night, including my dad and my brother. This was in the time before cell phones. There weren't cell phones available. People couldn't call and tell you they were fine. You didn't know. And we didn't know if my dad and brother were okay where they were. And even when they would make it home. To get home, they had to drive around the whole peninsula with everybody that was at the World Series game. The television came back. We started to see the destruction. San Francisco around us, the Cypress structure, which was in Oakland. And it was life-changing. For those that lived through 9/11, I would say it's that same feeling after 9/11 when you just saw destruction. And out of the Cypress structure, they just kept pulling bodies and pulling bodies of people who didn't survive. Each night on the news, there would always be a little hero story of someone who survived, and they would pull them out. There's an amazing story of a man that was trapped in his car for 90 hours. 90 hours, and he survived, and they pulled him. And it was a heroic story of the earthquake. The man that lived. October 17th never goes by without me thinking of that day, that exact moment. And I think about the people that lost their life that day, that were just trying to get home from work. Any natural disaster leaves devastation and an impact in somebody's life. There were 67 people that died in the 1989 earthquake. I grew up knowing what earthquakes were, but I never understood the devastation that an earthquake could bring until that day, till I could see it. And I was 12, so I knew exactly what was going on. That event did leave me a little scarred though. I don't like to be under things. Watching the Cypress structure collapse and the Bay Bridge lose a span as a 12-year-old made me extremely nervous because we had to drive the Bay Bridge often after that. And I hate being on the bottom deck of the Bay Bridge. For those that don't know, the top deck of the Bay Bridge goes into the city, into San Francisco, and the bottom deck goes out. So there's only one way to get in and one way to get out. And I hate being under the bottom deck of that bridge now. And I don't like to be in the bottom of parking garages. I just hate being under things or having to drive under things. It's definitely something that I carry with me, and I know it is from that moment in history. Thank you for letting me share October 17th with you all today. I didn't want this day to go past in our Vlogtober series without recalling this day and remembering the 67 people that died that day. I'm not going to ask for a like or subscribe on this video because that's not what this video is about. This is really just my personal recollection of what happened that day and just a remembrance. But just because we remember specific times and places because something traumatic happened, I think we can remember a specific time and place because good things happen too. So until my next adventure, go have yours.